Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our CENELEC webinar that we are having about the Annex Z, giving you some guidance on how to draft and best practices in relation to the Annex Z. So we have today the pleasure to have a few consultants of Ernst & Young with us. My name is Els and I will be moderating the webinar in the background. As usual, you are all muted during the presentations, but you can use the Q&A panel to submit your questions. So should you have a question, please use that panel to submit and the speakers will have a look at your questions during or after the presentations. So I think we can start right away, Frederic, with your intro on the topic. So please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Frédéric Mlanao, Account Manager in the Harmonized Standard Compliance team, and I'm together with Anda Banea and Mauro Soares, who will help me during this webinar. The webinar today is dedicated to the Annex Z and is organized in collaboration with EY and the European Commission. As you probably know, the Annex Z is a very critical element of a harmonized standard, and it's the primary reason for non-compliance. The goal of the webinar is to give you information that will hopefully help you improve the drafting of the Annex Z. Dan and Paco will start the webinar and will do the main chunk of it, giving you information about the HAS system, about how to interact with the HAS consultant, and most importantly, about how to draft the Annex Z. Then Mauro will take the floor to share some important links with you about where to find the Annex Z template on the CENELEC website. A Q&A session will close the webinar, and it will be an opportunity for you to write in the chat, in the Q&A section, and we will try to address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session. If some questions are not addressed during the Q&A, we will come back to you in a written manner, and we will come back to you with the written answers to your question. About the Q&A, very important elements. Please be aware that questions related to the court case will not be addressed. As well, if you have very specific questions that are very sector-specific or TC-specific, I invite you to contact your CCMC project manager. She or he will be happy to help you address your questions. So again, thank you for being with us this afternoon, and I will leave the floor to Dan and Paco and Tim and Hannah from EY for the first part of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Frédéric, for the introduction. I hope everyone can hear as well. But thank you very much all for joining today. We can start our part of the presentation. We see the screen, and we can show also our team. So my name is Daan BIJWAARD. I'm the project manager at EY, Ernst & Young, responsible for the day-to-day implementation of the project. I'm here today with my colleagues Tim and Hannah, who are responsible for the day-to-day operational implementation. And in addition, we have here today with us Francisco VERDERA, or Paco, as most people know him, who is leading our quality review team. So he's responsible for the quality assurance of the assessments, and he will explain the main topic of today, provide the information on best practices on drafting and Excel. So it's great to see that so many of you are participating today. I see there are already 100 people present in the room, so that's great. Of course, also thanks a lot to CCMC for providing this opportunity to engage with you. Many of you, of course, or most of you, I would say, know the HAS system.
Sorry, you're muted, Hannah. Yes.
Now?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
So we know the HAS system is important to your work and affects your daily work in the technical committees. So we are happy to give some more details about the working of the HAS system, and also to be able to answer some of your questions directly today in the chat and in the subsequent question and answer session that will come after our presentation. So what we have on the agenda. First, we have the introduction. That's what I'm doing now, basically. Then we will give you a brief operational update on where we are with the assessment work, the number of assessments we process as a support team, also the timeliness of our work. Then we will provide you some general, which are high-level best practices, so more from an operational point of view, particularly regarding how to ask for, at what stages you can ask for an assessment, and also regarding meeting request with HAS consultants. Then we have the main purpose of today's meeting, so that are the good practices on Annex Z and to how to avoid non-compliance issues deriving from Annex Z. So that was presented by Paco. And as said, we will end the meeting with a Q&A session. So we have, I think, about 1.5 hours dedicated to that. Based on our experience, that should be able to cover most ground. But if we are instead not possible, then we will collect, as Frederic already mentioned, all questions from the text box and from the chat box, and we'll reply in writing later. So again, this is our team, as I just explained. Yeah, so to give a little bit of background, so I think it's worth reiterating what the HAS project is about. But at a high level, the HAS system aims to contribute to the clarity, quality, consistency, and coherence of harmonized standards developed by the ISO, so CENELEC and ETSI. And the standards developed by the ISOs in reply to European Commission standardization request. And in doing so, we execute basically Article 10 of the Regulation on Standardization in 2012. Which defines, among others, that the European Commission may request ISOs to develop European standards, but also defines that the Commission, together with the ISO, shall assess the compliance of the document drafted with the initial request for standardization. So there, the HAS project comes in. So it should be perceived as a service. It's a service we deliver to the European Commission, but also a service we deliver to the technical bodies, to the TCs and the ISOs, with the overall aim to increase the compliance of harmonized standards, and as such increase the publication rate or the citation rate, it should actually be, of standards in the official journal of the EU. So the latter we did achieve under the former contract, so the citation rate went up, and that's also what we are trying to achieve now as well. And we do this by ensuring that typical compliance concerns are identified in the reports of the HAS consultants with the aim to reduce non-compliance. And we provide also targeted training and support to HAS consultants, the ISOs, as well as to the commission services, so the desk officers. So this is part of one of these training activities. So part of the training activities we offer to the ISOs, today's session. We support the Commission in its efforts to reduce the number of non-cited hands, so that relates back to what I said earlier. And our key operational task as our support team is to ensure that HAS consultants can focus on their work of carrying out the assessments, so we ensure that they get the needed documents in time, that the meetings with HAS consultants, USTCs can ask for are arranged in time, etc. So the next element will be presented by my colleagues Tim and Hannah, where you give some update on the progress in the assessment.
Thank you, Daan. So since the start of the HAS project, we have completed 1,732 assessment requests. And as you can see here in this figure, the most busy sectors are machinery, LVD, and noise, followed by a number of other ones, but the majority of assessments are actually being conducted for these sectors. What you can also see is that most of the requests that we received have been completed. Only a few are in process, and there are a number of items that at this point in time when we took the graph still had to be assigned, but overall, as you can see here, there are no items that are waiting for a long time to be assigned to a HAS consultant. So if we can move to the next slide, we have also a graph on the timeliness of the assessment work. So you can see here that at the beginning of the project, and also the previous year, 2023, we had some issues still in terms of timeliness. Quite some assessment requests were delivered later than the 35 days, and there were also still pretty long delays for some assessment requests. However, after January 2024, we see a big reversal of this trend. So as you can see, currently we are completing over 70% of assessment requests we receive within 35 days. And we've also significantly reduced or all but eliminated assessment requests that take a very long time. The delays that we're still currently experiencing are mainly linked to two reasons. So first of all, sometimes we do receive a very big batch of standards in a sector where there's limited capacity, which then means that we have to assess them all at once. And this causes delays as most of them have to be done by the same HAS consultant. And the second reason is that we really aim to prioritize consistency between assessments. So that means that if we receive a request for a standard or draft standard that has been assessed previously by a HAS consultant, we aim to always assign it to the same HAS consultant. And that can mean that if this HAS consultant already has 2-3 assessments going on, there's a longer deadline. But to make sure that you have the same HAS consultant following your draft standard throughout the whole process of drafting this standard, it's something that is necessary. Then the next slide is a small overview of the general trends in terms of compliance rates. So as you can see here, the further a draft standard is in the assessment process, the more likely it is to receive also a good or a compliant assessment result. So this is good. It means also that the assessment work done by HAS consultants is usually taken into consideration and improves the compliance of the draft standards. However, as you can see in the last confirmatory assessment stage, there's still 55% of standards that we receive that receive a lack of compliance verdict. So there is still room for improvement in that sense.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Now I can go quickly through the part of the best practices under the HAS system and what you can expect from the HAS consultants. So I believe you can be familiar with this already, but as a reminder, you can request the HAS assessment on 4 stages. So in total, there can be 4 assessments per standardization request. First on the committee draft or first working draft, then inquiry, formal vote, and if that one receives the negative assessment, then there's also possibility to request the last confirmatory assessment at the LCA stage. From the HAS consultant, you can expect that they will perform verification and assessment tasks. They do work in support of, but do not represent the Commission. And the Commission considers, but is not bound to the result of the HAS assessment. That's important to highlight. HAS consultants convey the Commission's position to the technical bodies, and they are not allowed to modify the reports or assess the revised documents during the meetings with TCs. They do not contribute to the standard development process. And that's why the meetings with the HAS consultant can only happen after the assessment is already completed and received by the technical committee. So then passing to the best practices on the meeting request, also as a reminder, you should submit the meeting request after you receive the completed assessment, and it should be submitted around 4 weeks prior to the meeting date, so that we have 1 week to respond to your assessment request, and then it gives enough time for the HAS consultants to book their time in their agendas. The full agenda of meeting should be provided together with the meeting request, so that allows HAS consultants to prepare better and to review their own notes on the assessments they performed. Again, the meetings have to be linked to the previous assessments, as mentioned before. In principle, physical meetings can be possible, but they are subject to approval by the HAS consultants, who have to cover their own traveling costs. So that's why we prefer when there's also the online meeting possibility, as it makes it easier for HAS consultants to attend that meetings. In the presentation, you will also have the current link to the meeting request. It was changed in March this year, so please make sure you're using the correct link when you submit your request. And in an unlike case, if you don't receive the response within around 1 to 2 weeks, please also don't hesitate to send us the email on hassupport@be.ey.com. Our support email, so we can check if we received it correctly, and in case not, just try to still proceed it on time. As a reminder, the consultants during the meeting can convey the commission position and can participate in the meeting to clarify the comments on the assessment, but they cannot contribute to the further development process of the standards. They cannot offer guidance for TCs how to make the standard compliant. They can only explain the comments. They cannot perform assessment on documents received from ESUS directly, so not through the official assessment request that goes through our UI desk. And they cannot modify completed assessment reports. So I think that's all as a reminder for the meeting requests. Then the last part for here is the Annex Z non-compliance. So we gathered the most often not completed common criteria from the assessment report. And as you can see, the ones connected to Annex Z listed in here are quite common, with 42%, so nearly half of the criterion 1 to 22 from the assessment report that you should be familiar with. It's the most often found criteria that is not fulfilled. So that also shows why it's important to have the seminar today and to clarify certain matters around the Annex Z. We can also see the same criteria per stage. So as you can see, often the compliance rate is the non-compliance rate is getting lower with the stages, but still the percentage, for example, for the first criterion listed here on the LCA stage is 17%, which is quite high. So we would aim to make this number lower, so your assessment can receive the compliant result. For us, that's a quick overview of our numbers and our work. And now I would like to pass the floor to Paco, who will take more technical part.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here. I see a very substantial participation. I would like to, first of all, start in the next slide regarding the nature of the Annex Z. It's just a clarification. First of all, we have to understand that the Annex Z, it's an informative annex. Okay, so this means for the standardization community to apply the standard, you don't need the Annex Z. Okay, so if you want to apply the standard, out of the legal framework. Of course, you can make use of the standard however you want. And then, of course, you may take your own measures and your own decisions regarding how to apply the standard. This means simply that the manufacturers, of course, like any other user of the standard, can use the standard, let's say, according to their needs. Because the standards are voluntary documents that are in the market, they are developed by consensus, and therefore they are serving different economic operators in the market. Could be manufacturers, could be laboratories, could be market surveillance authorities, could be regulatory authorities, could be anything. So we have a list of uses of the standards. Another thing is if we want to use the standard for the purposes of presumption of conformity, what we call the legal effect of the harmonized standard. If we want to use the harmonized standard in that perspective, we need to provide the necessary information to the user of the standard on which parts of the standard are necessary to be applied to obtain what we call the legal effect. And the legal effect, once we have citation in the official journal, it's the presumption of conformity. The presumption of conformity has important benefits for the economic operators, in particular for the manufacturers, but it also has, let's say, important benefits for regulators and for other, let's say, economic players and social and economic players. Once I said that, it is absolutely fundamental to identify precisely how the different essential requirements of the different pieces of legislation that are affecting the CENELEC standards under the new legislative framework, how these essential requirements are covered by the standard. Okay? In that sense, I'm going to refer to clauses or subclauses. You are going to hear that repeatedly across the presentation. Clauses or subclauses, clauses or subclauses. Some people may say, yes, Paco, but we have sections and subsections in the standard. Yes, we didn't want to use on purpose the word sections or subsections because a clause or a subclause could be a paragraph. As long as you identify it clearly and there is a clear traceability and the user can understand perfectly that you are referring to that part of the standard and not to the other parts of the standard. Okay, so this means that in the image you have on this screen, on this presentation, we have on the left the EU directive or regulation with the essential requirements. And then we also have other requirements, but we are going now to focus mainly on the essential requirements. And then in the right of the PPT, we have the draft harmonized standard that you are developing, which contains clauses or subclauses. And the Annex Z said precisely what it's going to do is to identify the different essential requirements. And I repeat, from the requirements contained in the regulation, those that are essential requirements, with the sections of the standard, and in this case, we call them clauses or subclauses, that are covering this, that are providing requirements, or sometimes other elements that we are going to see, to support the implementation of the essential requirements. So this is an important introduction that we have to take into consideration. So the Annex Z set gives transparency to the user of the standard on which clauses or subclauses have to apply to obtain the presumption of conformity. Of course, presumption of conformity, legal effect, only applies if the standard is cited in the official journal by the European Commission. according to the regulation 1025 on European standardization, it is clearly said that the European Commission, together with the ISOs, will assess the European standards regarding the requirements, the essential requirements that are in the directive or the regulation, and the requirements contained in the standardization request. Then the Commission, if the Commission finds that the standard complies with the requirements in the standardization request and with essential requirements in the legislation, the Commission will publish the reference in the official journal. But we know, this is the articles, in particular Article 10, if you read, you will have from the beginning the establishment of the standardization request until the publication in the official journal. So this is Article 10 of Regulation 1025 on European standardization. But it is true that the standard, the harmonized standard, might be also cited in the official journal with a restriction. So in this case, this restriction may have an impact also on the legal effect that will be conferred, will be given by the harmonized standard. Okay, so this is just to introduce you the concept that, okay, we are dealing with a document that is developed by the ISOs, but that has, let's say, an important regulatory perspective. Let's go to the next slide. And of course, you are invited to issue questions at any time. You can put them in the chat. Then when we arrive to the time of answering the questions, we will answer most of them, or as many as we can, that are related to the topic of today, which is Annex Z. And we will give you an answer in writing also after some days. Okay. Here we are going to refer to mandatory things to be done or recommendations. Okay, so we are going to, our intention here today is to share with you our experience in the last years of the HAS project on things that have complicated the life of a draft standard. So we are going to try to point out things that in our opinion should be avoided, and practices that, in our opinion, should be promoted. This doesn't mean that the technical committee may decide, or the subcommittee in CENELEC, may decide to go on its own and do whatever you want. I mean, we are not going to interfere in a process that is a standardization process. That the Commission, of course, has tools to verify if the process has followed due process, if all the necessary conditions as in Regulation 1025 have been fulfilled, etc., etc. But this is the role of the Commission. Here we are in a HAS project that is, as Dan has said before, it is done as a service. It's a service to the Commission, but it's also a service to the standardization community. And our intention, and CEN and CENELEC, the European Commission, and the contractor of the HAS project, which is EY, we are on the same boat. Our intention is to ensure that the European standardization system provides the better output possible to ensure the maximum citation as possible. So we are on the same boat. The only thing is that some of us, we are the bad guys or bad girls, because we have today some HAS consultants in front of here in this meeting that of course are ladies. So we have the bad boys and the bad guys that we are here. Sometimes we do it. We are fortunate in the way we do our work. Sometimes as humans we may be unfortunate, but our intention is really to support the system to ensure the better chances for citation. Okay, so when I refer to mandatory, means something that in our opinion shall be done. And when we are saying recommendations, is something that in our opinion could be convenient to do, to ensure or at least maximize the possibilities to have citation of a standard. And we know that, okay, even in those cases, many things could happen. But let's now go to this presentation of today that tries to really present to you our experience regarding the Annex Z. So first of all, the first very simple thing, the scope does not contain requirements. As a consequence, if a scope does not contain requirements, the scope shall not be cited in the Annex Z. So all those Annex Z that say 1, so essential requirement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, scope, this should not be done because the scope as such cannot contain requirements. So in principle, you shall not refer to the scope in the Annex Z. Another element that in our opinion is critical, and it's one of the criteria used by the consultants to assess the draft standards that are proposed for analysis or for assessment, is that if you look at the catalog of CENELEC or ETSI, and you see a title of the standard, and from the title you understand that the standard covers something, then you buy the standard or you take the standard, and then you check the scope, and you see that the scope is not aligned with the title of the standard, because the title of the standard is like this, and then the scope of the standard limits to a particular type of products. And then you go to the Annex Z and you see that the risks of the Annex Z correspond to the title, but not to the scope. So this means there are more risks than covered, or more essential requirements that are, no, essential requirements, not, sorry, risks that are covered than should be covered because the standard in reality is narrower. So if there is no alignment between the title, between the scope and the Annex Z, that's a sufficient reason for a negative assessment. So try to ensure that there is an alignment, that there is a consistency between the title of the standard, the scope, and the Annex Z. And this, of course, means that we should avoid any product or aspect in the scope that is not covered by the title also, or in the Annex Z, as this may lead to confusion by to the user of the standard. So I think here we have given you some, let's say, mandatory things. We are also going to give you a recommendation. Please avoid as much as possible any reference in the scope on whether the product can be used only by professional or trained staff. First of all, the scope is not a place to say that. But secondly, it could be interpreted that the technical body is trying to limit, is trying to, I remember a very important, very well-known collection of standards in CENELEC in the past that was saying that these products were only going to be, were only intended for persons of a normal age and without disabilities. Okay, well, this is a way to try to limit the responsibilities of the manufacturers, but to do it in the scope that shall not have any requirement, it's something. So I'm just being provocative here to explain to you the concept. So try to avoid as much as possible any reference in the scope on whether the product can be used for by a particular or not, because the standards are to be used by anybody, by the manufacturers, by the test houses, by the market surveillance authorities, by the consumer representatives, by anybody. I mean, the standards are there in the market for being used by all the economic operators and the social and economic operators. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, sorry, because I'm just checking that we have some comments. Okay, Annex Z should not refer to the scope. Well, in fact, it's not should, shall not refer to, shall not contain requirements, the scope. As a consequence, it cannot support the implementation of the essential requirements. As a corollary, as a consequence, evident consequence, the Annex Z shall not refer to the scope. Let's go to the next one. Well, this is just to illustrate the famous concept of sections or subsections. Okay, it's you may say, yeah, but I prefer to say clauses or subclauses. Again, it could be a paragraph. It could be paragraph A. It could be paragraph B. We don't care. The only thing we want to illustrate in this slide is please understand that the, let's say, low voltage directive, EMC directive, radio equipment directive, any other regulation or directive for which you are developing harmonized standards. These have essential requirements. Essential requirement 1.1, 1.2, 1.7, 1. Blah, blah, blah. Some parts of the standard are what we call the non-harmonized part, which means, okay, they may have an impact on electrical safety, because at the end, everything has an impact on electrical safety, but they are not directly linked
I think we lost Paco for a second, or are we the only ones that are no longer hearing him?
Yes, maybe let's wait for him to reconnect.
In this case, we could have a subsection.
Paco, unless it was only us, but the sound appears to have been was disrupted for about 20, 30 seconds, I think. So maybe you can go back a little bit.
Can you hear me now? Where did you lose me? Can I ask you?
I think almost at the beginning of the slide.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So what I mean here is that this is, thank you so much for making me know. I will disconnect the camera just in case, because maybe this may have an impact on the quality of the sound. So essentially here we have the essential requirements in the directive or the regulation, and some parts of the standard respond directly to the essential requirements, and some parts do not respond to the essential requirements. So we have in orange what we call the non-harmonized part, and in gray what we call the harmonized part. Okay. So the first thing that we need to ensure when drafting an Annex Z is the granularity, and in particular to separate as much as possible, well, to separate the harmonized parts in different sections of the non-harmonized part of the draft standard. So this means if essential requirement 1.3 is responded by this kind of requirements, we should put these requirements in clearly distinct sections or subsections of the standard. This doesn't mean that you may not have a clause with harmonized and non-harmonized part. No, you may have a clause that contains a harmonized part, but it's clearly identified by a number or in any way that the user can identify that this part is replying to the essential requirement 1.2. Okay, and then you may have other parts that are really not related to the essential requirements. Again, in the electrical sector is a little bit more complex because everything you could say has a relation with electrical safety. Yes, but what we need is a granularity to know, okay, explicitly this essential requirement is associated with these requirements in the standard. So it is sufficient, and this is a recommendation, that harmonized and non-harmonized parts are clearly identified and separated in subclauses, even within the same clause. It doesn't matter. It could be 3.1 non-harmonized, 3.2 harmonized, or 3.1 harmonized, 3.2 non-harmonized. But then we have in very separated, very clearly identified, in order to have the sufficient granularity for the Annex Z to be drafted. If they, of course, if these non-harmonized and harmonized can be placed in different clauses, even better. But we know that some series of standards, you cannot change the structure because we are based on IEC standards, we are based on standards that have been applied long time ago, and we have different series coexisting in a certain period of time. Okay, so we understand that things cannot be changed sometimes, but what you have to understand is that we want to have a clear granularity in order to identify these essential requirements in which part of the standard are being addressed. So again, this is not mandatory that you need a section for each regulatory requirement. We are not saying that. What we are saying is that each part that is addressing each essential requirement can be clearly identified in the standard for the purpose of transparency to the user of the standard. Okay, let's go to the next screen, to the next slide. I see that we have some comments, but also some comments from our HAS consultants. So it is good that our HAS consultants comment, but it is also good that the other people comment. So because this seminar is, of course, addressed to everybody, but in particular, we are really willing to have a dialogue with you, with the members of the technical committees and the officers of the technical committees. Another element is that, of course, an implication of what I said before is that the Annex Z has to be sufficiently detailed to perfectly understand with no ambiguity or need for interpretation which are the clauses that are supporting the EU legislation. And the Annex Z has to be granular enough to support the risk assessment and mitigation in a precise matter. And we will talk about risk assessment a little bit later. This is just to introduce to you what is the concept behind the Annex Z. Let's go to the next slide. And I take the opportunity to drink a little bit of water. Okay. But it's not only a matter of identifying clearly which requirements. It's also identifying clearly which clauses or subclauses can be referred to in the Annex Z. So, in principle, and again, we are referring here as mandatory recommendations, etc. Again, I tell you, the technical committees are the ones to decide what they want to do. What we are giving you here is do's and don'ts. So you are free to follow or not. But just to tell you that according to our experience, if you don't follow this, you may complicate your life or the life of the draft standards. So references to informative parts, reference to scope, or reference to testing methods alone in the Annex Z do not fly, are prohibited. Why? Because, okay, the Annex Z is informative, but it's informatively linking the essential requirements of the directive or the regulation with those clauses or subclauses that are providing requirements on how to do. And they are not the requirements, they are requirements. So this means they are providing a solution, okay, but it's going to be the solution that is assessed by consultants and then assessed by the Commission. So it's a solution, but it's a, let's say, a solution that gives you a benefit, which is presumption of conformity. So in principle, informative parts of the standard or even test methods alone shall not be referred to in the Annex Z. In addition, no reference shall be made to other standards, not even as information or as notes, because we have heard many times from technical committees, no, but this is going to give transparency because, yes, no, but introducing the Annex Z is not the place to introduce references to other standards. The place to introduce references to other standards is the text of the standard and the normative references section, but in particular, each part where you are referring to the standard. So Annex Z is not the place to refer to other standards. The right place to refer to other standards in the context of harmonizations, because the rest, okay, we are not here to give our opinion. We are here to deal with the harmonized part of the harmonized standards. The right place to refer to other standards are the sections or subsections that are listed in the Annex Z. This is a mistake, not ZA. So we should correct this, sorry. ZZ, but not the Annex ZZ itself. So no, in particular, we know that some standards have Part 1 generic requirements, Part 2 product family requirements, Part 3, Part 4 particular requirements. We know this architecture and these changes from subsector to subsector. But according to the internal regulations, Part 1 is a standard to be considered a normative reference. And this was a contribution given the other day. We had a meeting by Gert Maes, one of our HAS consultants for LBD. According to the CENELEC internal regulations, Part 1 is just another normative reference. Okay, it could be important because maybe it provides the generic requirements, etc., but it's another standard. When we are assessing the standards, we are assessing them individually. Of course, if there is a reference standard or a standard that is referred to in this standard, we consider it as a reference. And we read some sections in the context of the standard that is referred. If the paragraph, section, subsection makes reference to the other standard, to the Part 1, for example, or Part 2, we have to read that paragraph, that section, that subsection in the context of the other standard that is referred to. But we are not assessing the other standard. We are assessing the draft standard that is in front of us. Okay? So what does it mean, all of this? Please do not put reference to any standard, including Annex 1, including Part 1. So Annex Z is not the place to make reference to other standards. The only possible exception we have is the Type A, Type B, and Type C standards under the Machinery Directive or Machinery Regulation, the new regulation. This is an exception that we may still have to further analyze because it's an unclear case. But again, it's up to you if you refer to a standard, even if informative, even in an annex, even in whatever, be sure that the only thing you are going to ensure is that the assessment of the standard will take longer and possibly will result in a lack of compliance assessment. Of course, I cannot speak on behalf of my colleagues, the consultants, the HAS consultants, but what you can be sure is that the quality review team will identify immediately if a standard was cited in the Annex Z and this was not a reason for a lack of compliance. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Well, this is going to also possibly to create some questions, some comments. What I'm going to do now is to recommend you something. But this recommendation soon may become a general rule, because the new standardization requests that are being approved are starting to contain this general rule that will be in the future. And what is this? The Annex set should list all applicable and non-applicable essential requirements. And again, in the Annex Z, I have to apologize for this. This is another mistake. I will immediately correct the versions. I'm taking just note where the word. In fact, we are not addressing at all Annex Set A in this presentation. We are only talking about Set. So this means if there is any Annex Set A here, this should be corrected, because in reality, we are not here to talk about Annex Set A, which you know in CENELEC means the list of standards, in particular international standards that are adopted in Europe, or numbering or other standards that are undated. So in this case, we are only referring to Annex Z. So we have to, our recommendation would be to list all the applicable and non-applicable essential requirements. For sure, you have to check your standardization request. And if the standardization request requires you to do it, then it's clear you have to do it. If not, it's up to you, okay? But of course, imagine that the standard only covers one or two essential requirements. And we have a long list of essential requirements that are not covered by the standard. So we could have 10 pages, 7 pages of essential requirements, and only 2 of them being applicable. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a generic rule, a way to measure if something is relevant or not relevant, because in this case, we would be introducing noise to the user of the standard. So contrary to what we want, instead of transparency, we would be annoying the user of the standard, because he would have, or she would have to read not applicable, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. Yeah, but then it's better to put just those that are applicable. A way to measure that is that around 80% are not applicable, then it's better to only list those that are relevant. Okay. And another thing that could sound new to you, we are going to ask you to indicate for each essential requirement if it's covered, and then we have to indicate in which section is covered. If it's partially covered, so this means the essential requirement, the standard covers part of the essential requirement, but cannot ensure by itself the coverage of the essential requirement for many reasons. It could be for many reasons, maybe because there is another standard that covers the other part or the other aspect of the essential requirement. Or if the essential requirement is not covered, or it could happen in some cases that is not applicable. Okay. One example for non-applicable requirements, and sorry for those that were here this morning, it could be a wooden toy, a requirement, even if it's not a CENELEC product, a requirement on electrical safety would not be applicable to a wooden toy, because there is no electric circuit, there is no electromagnetic compatibility, there is nothing. Okay, so this is just an example. It's a stupid example, but just to illustrate that. Let's go to the next slide. Well, what I'm going to say now, it's also related to the fact that the Annex set is providing requirements on how to give a technical solution or how to apply essential requirements in the product. The thing is that assessment methods and test methods shall be indicated in the harmonized section. So we need for requirements to have a test method or an assessment method to demonstrate compliance with the essential requirement. This could be in the same section that is referred to in the Annex Z, or in other sections of the draft standard, or even be a normative reference to another standard. So we could have a standard on tests, and instead of duplicating the test method or the assessment method, we just make reference in the harmonized section, which is referred to in the Annex Z. The tests, of course, they have to be reproducible and they have to be appropriate. And when I mean also that should be reproducible, we know that some technical committees sometimes are given alternative tests for a particular requirement. Well, we know why these things happen in the consensus process. Sometimes we have different notified bodies. Some of them, they have a particular type of doing things. And then, okay, sometimes for consensus purposes, the technical committee says, okay, let's have these 3 alternative tests. The problem is we know as engineers or people that is working in the technology that sometimes it's very difficult to have the same result applying different methods. So this means that we could have 2 products to be approved according to 3 methods, but then a 4th method could give disapproval or non-pass criteria for a particular product that was approved by the other methods. So in this case, my recommendation would be, if we need to have reproducible tests and tests that can give us a clear criteria on compliance or no compliance on the essential requirement, if you have no other means than creating or putting several tests, which I would strongly recommend not to do, then please put a reference method. So a method that in case of discrepancy can decide if there is an approval or not, or compliance or not on the particular essential requirement. But again, you may remember that we said before in one of the slides, but the Annex Z shall not refer to test methods. Yes, shall not refer to sections containing test methods alone. So Annex Z shall refer to sections containing requirements, but it may contain requirements and a test method, or it may contain requirements and then reference to a test method in the standard, or contain reference to a test method in another standard. But the Annex Z shall not refer to sections containing only test methods alone. And this is the trick, unless one of the essential requirements refers to assessment methods. Okay, so if the essential requirement, which I'm sure, I think in the LVD this does not happen, but imagine that, well, we know that in the machinery regulation, for example, yes, we have some cases where some essential requirements refer to tests. In fact, the essential requirement itself is the assessment method. Then, in those cases, yes, it could be appropriate to refer to a paragraph that provides the test to assess this. So, as a recommendation, also, test methods may apply to both the harmonized or non-harmonized part. So in this case, maybe it could be a good practice that both harmonized and non-harmonized sections that have to use that test method refer to the same section or subsection containing the applicable test method or containing a reference to the test method in another standard. Okay. Sorry for going too much into the detail, but this is, and this kind of presentations, normally I hate them because I like normally to give more graphical presentations, but in this case, I think it's important to clarify these concepts. But because at the end, we have seen that well, what we are presenting to you is just the experience on many assessments that led to a lack of compliance. And also, disclaimer, this is it's not that it's not that I was learning under the commons law, which is highly based on tribunals and suing people, etc. But frankly speaking, the civil law, in this case, which is mostly the law that applies in the European Union in a majority of cases, frankly speaking, is more based on the tradition. So what we are going here to do, what we are doing here is giving you the tradition of the HAS assessments and the examples that led to problems in the past. Of course, the technical committee can do whatever they want, but it's your decision, and then you should know that this could complicate the, let's say, the assessment with compliance. Let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry for the political speech I have just made, but sometimes I have to deviate a little bit, otherwise it will be just reading what is written there. So please do not refer to other standards in the Annex Z. Do not refer to other standards in the Annex Z. Do not refer to other standards in the Annex Z. Annex Z is not the place to refer to other standards, even if it's a part one of the same series. And again, remember, some exceptions could apply. We still don't have, let's say, a completely clear criteria in the case of the machinery standards type A, type B, and type C. But for the rest, I mean, if you want to risk, of course, do it. But my strong suggestion or strong recommendation or even a strong requirement is avoid any reference to any other standard. If a reference to other standard is needed, then the TC shall introduce it in the harmonized part of the standard and then refer to it, to that part in Annex Z. But please, please, please do not make reference in the Annex Z. I hope that after repeating it 200 times, I don't know if I will convince you that this is what you should do, but at least I convince you that if you do it, well, we may complicate the process. Let's go to the next slide. I hope I'm not sounding prepotent because this is not my intention, but it's just to tell you that according to the experience, most assessments that did that, they had a complication. Okay, let's give an example for CENELEC. Reference in Annex Z to clauses or subclauses of another standard that is not explicitly referred to in the draft standard. So this means in the Annex Z, maybe, I mean, I cannot judge the intentionality of the technical committee when they did that. So I'm not going to say there was an intention. Okay, possibly during the drafting of the standard, there was a reference that was not included there. What did the technical committee do? Put the reference in the Annex Z. As a result, the assessment took longer because there was a long discussion inside the process, even with the European Commission, etc., to know if this was acceptable or not. So in this case, the Annex Z of the draft, part 15, refers to sections of part 1 that are not even referred to in the harmonized section or subsection of the draft standard. Two issues arise here. Reference to another standard in the Annex Z, which is something that I repeated 200 million times, and I don't like to exaggerate. The standard that is referred to is not even included in the normative references. Why? Because the technical committee considered that part 1 is not a normative reference. But again, let me remind you that the internal regulations say that part 1 is to be considered as a normative reference. So, strong recommendation again, the Annex Z could refer to the section or subsection that contains the reference, and then you cite the reference in the normative references. And again, remember, some exceptions could apply in the case of types A, B, and C machinery. Let's go to the next slide. 2. Thank you. I don't know if it's Daan, it's Tim, or it's Hannah, but thank you. Thank you for passing the slides for me. Do not refer to other requirements than the essential requirements. Oh, fasten your seatbelts. Okay. Yes, good. I like this one. So, according to our experience, this has also complicated the assessment of a standard. Let me explain what is behind this. So a section or subsection of the draft standard is addressing a requirement in the directive that is not in the list of essential requirements. You know that normally the essential requirements of a directive or a regulation, they are included in an annex, okay? Well, this was a requirement that was in the text of the directive, but it was not even a essential requirement. The main issue is that, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, so you could say, Paco, you're wrong. I accept it. I could be wrong. I'm human, and I can have an opinion. I can have a bad day. But a requirement that is not an essential requirement may have an implication on compliance, may have an implication on liability of the manufacturer, may have implications on a product that is is withdrawn from the market in a particular member state. Okay, so it could have legal, economic, reputational implications, not to comply with a requirement of the directive. But those requirements that are not essential requirements do not provide legal effect in the sense of presumption of conformity. And as a consequence, they shall not be referred to in the Annex Z, because the Annex Z is meant to link the essential requirements with the sections or subsections of the standard, draft standard, that are related to the, that are replying to this essential requirement. So this means many things, that you shall not refer to it directly in the Annex Z, but don't be picky, don't try to avoid this rule doing an indirect reference. What does it mean, an indirect reference? An indirect reference means Annex Z refers to a section. This section does not contain requirements that are not essential requirements, that not provide solutions, requirements to reply to this the non-essential requirements. But then you have a reference to another paragraph, another section or subsection of the standard that is replying to that indirect. So this means you are having an indirect reference in the Annex Z. Please try to avoid this situation. Okay, I hope it's clear enough. Let's go to the next slide. I was expecting an increase of the questions in this point. I see 22 now, so we had one more question. Maybe it's on this, but I was expecting really going from 21 to 23. Ooh. Paco, shut up. Okay, no, I'm joking, because here the intention is to have as many questions as possible and to reply to them. So another example, referring to informative sections of a draft standard. Only sections or subsections containing requirements of the draft standard shall be referred to in Annex Z. This is something we have said several times. So here we have a comment from one of my colleagues has consultants. Annex Z refers to informative Annex F. What do you think? If it's an informative annex, informative parts of the standard cannot be used as they do not contain requirements. So my colleague, the HAS consultant that wrote this, was right, because in fact Annex Z has to refer to paragraphs, sections, subsections that contain requirements. And it could be section, subsection containing requirements and test or assessment, but always with the requirements. If clauses contain elements of other pieces of legislation, please move them to other subsections. Do not put together things replying to LVD and things replying to EMC. And you know, I know what you are going to tell me. You are going to tell me, oh, in electrotechnology, this is virtually impossible. Well, virtually doesn't mean it's impossible. So please try to separate as much as possible, because if we don't separate, the chances are that the consultant will spot it, and then we will have a consultant saying that you are putting in a subsection things corresponding to one piece of legislation together with things corresponding to another piece of legislation. So this is just, again, a list of things. I'm sorry, really, today maybe it's not my day. I'm sounding a little bit prepotent, but my intention really is not to be prepotent. It's just to give you examples that led in the past to problems. So this is our intention here. Please take it as it is, as recommendations, as experience on things that, in our opinion, should be avoided. But you are the ones to decide. You are the ones drafting the standards. Another example. Oh, 24. Oh, 24 questions. Very good. So more work for Hannah and team. It's okay. Following the exchanges between the TC and consultants, previous assessments, Annex Z refers for almost all safety objectives to clause 5, 6, 8. A granularity to subclause level would be better suited. So this means this is a very diplomatic way to say, sorry, you are not granular enough. So you are not giving me the granularity I need. Examples. Clause 5 contains mostly definitions. Only a couple of subclauses contain requirements that actually matter. Clause 6 contains subclauses that may be related to other legislation like ROS. Clause 8 contains subclauses on EMC that are not needed for LVD. Clause 9 contains non-safety related tests, EMC, power factor, etc. So please don't do that, because so if you, the only thing you have to do is to say section 312, I put LVD. 312, 313, I put EMC. 314, I put ROS. And then in the Annex Z, you say 312 only. Good? That's it. It's as simple as that. We are not asking you to change the structure of the standard, in particular in series like 60335-1, sorry, that's one, forget that one, the 60335, 60-220. So there are so many series of standards that now is not the time to change anything. Imagine that we say medical devices, 60601. Let's change the structure. No, sorry, these standards are, we are not here to change the standard, but you can introduce subclauses inside the clauses, and then there is sufficient granularity to solve this. Okay, thank you, please do so. Let's go to the next one. Are we okay with the time, Dan? I don't see you very alarmed, so we are, no? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Maybe we are too good, because I was not expecting this slide now here. Okay, so recommendations, but recommendations means, in fact, is conclusions. This is what I mean, because in reality, some of them, they are not recommendations. They are strong invitations, but okay. Before drafting the Annex Z, okay, a particular technical committee that is very important in IEC said once that they never drafted a risk assessment on their products. Okay, I'm not going to comment this comment to this statement. What I can tell you is that before drafting the Annex Z, the DC should, or the subcommittee, or the working group, or whoever, should have identified the risks of the product. And risks in this case, even if it's an EMC standard. So risk that there will be perturbances, that there will, one equipment will annoy another equipment, etc. So take risks in the wide sense. Of course, the TC has to identify the risks of the product. We are not asking you here to have a 200 pages risk assessment, but at least to be aware which are the risks. which can be the foreseeable intended use, the reasonably foreseeable intended use of the product, who are the users, potential, non-potential, foreseeable of the product, and which are the aspects that you have to cover in the standard to reply to the essential requirements. So please, before drafting the Annex Z, make this assessment, consider which are the elements. You have experience on the products. You have experience on how to do the product. You have experience on how to test the product. So you have the knowledge there to anticipate and to identify which are the risks that you have to cover in the standard. The Annex Z shall clearly identify if the risks are fully covered, partially covered, or not covered. Because if a user of a harmonized standard is applying a clause or a subclause where you are saying that this is corresponding or giving requirements to apply essential requirement 1, 2, 3, he may think or she may think that applying that sentence is covering the essential requirement. So in case it is not the case, please indicate it in the column for remarks. And of course, take that into consideration also in the information of the, let's say, harmonized part of the standard. Please do not mix under the same section or subsection harmonized and non-harmonized parts. And the same applies to mixing in the same section or subsection requirements from different pieces of legislation. Do not refer in Annex Z to legal requirements that are not essential requirements. You can do it in the standard, but not in the Annex Z, not in the sections that are referred to in the Annex Z. Do not refer to other standards. I think I didn't say it today. Do not refer to other standards. I think I didn't say it today. Do not refer to other standards in Annex Z. If you have to refer to something, refer to sections or subsections that refer to these standards, but not in the Annex Z, in the content of the standard. Please do not refer in the Annex Z to parts that are containing informative parts or parts without requirements. Again, exception, you could refer to a test method if the test method or the assessment method itself is part of essential requirements. And refer to sections or subsections containing requirements, or requirements and test methods, or requirements and reference to paragraphs or sections or subsections containing test methods, or requirements and reference to other standards. I have to thank you very much for your attention. In particular, I have to thank you also for the 25 questions. And then the floor is yours. So I shut up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Paco. Thank you very much for the detailed explanation. Perhaps we can have a short break before we move on with the question and answer part, because we have until 5 basically. So we have quite a bit of time left to discuss questions. If we not need all the time, we will stop earlier. But we did need the time in the earlier sessions we organized for CEN. So yeah, I think there will be quite a few questions. So let's first have a short break before we continue, and then we can start again. Let's say in 10 minutes from now at 3:30. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Are you there also again, Paco?
Yes, here I am. I was just watching at the interesting questions. We have some questions that I think are very interesting to clarify.
Maybe you can bring them on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I must confess that there is as I said, I was really I'm glad that we had some participants and some officers in the technical committees providing questions together with my colleagues, the HAS consultants. So how do we proceed, Dan?
Yeah, and we were trying to bring it on screen, but we are still trying to do that. But we can.
No.
We can.
Okay, we can start if you want. I can open some of the. Fred. Sorry, Fred. Do you want to, please?
Yes, thank you, Paco. Thank you, Dan. So I propose before you start with the Q&A, I propose that Mauro takes the floor so he can present some useful links as well as do a live demo for the audience to show where to find useful templates and where to find the Annex Z on the CENELEC boss. And then we will leave you the floor for the Q&A session. Is that okay for you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, as Frederic explained it, I'm going to present several links where you can find extra information about the guidance documents on Annex Z, and as well a link to the previous webinar linked to the European Harmonized Standards development process. So the presentation that I'm sharing now will be available for you after this webinar, and in the second slide, where I'm now, you will find the link to the CENELEC boss. By clicking on it, you will be able to access the CENELEC boss link, and I'm going to share the page that open it. Yeah, exactly. So this is the CENELEC boss web page where the hyperlink was connected. And here you can easily access it by in the Google. You just type CENELEC boss. You open the link, and you can come to the top right corner to reference material, forms and templates, and here you find the subsection titled Annex Z, and here you can find all the templates available for CENELEC, linked to which sector, or a generic template if the sector that you are working with it doesn't have a specific template. But yeah, for example, you have the generic template for all the Annex Z without any specific template, sector without any specific template, or for example here the template specific for LVD or medical devices, or even for RED and EU EMC medical devices. In this case, it's like a specific from CEN, but sometimes it's needed for CENELEC. On top of that, there is as well some instructions, guidance, depending on the sector as well, and yes, just to address as well other type of guidance, not linked with Annex Z itself, but really important for you, the normative references guidance that is always useful for the TCs to develop the harmonized standards. And that's it from my side. I hope it was clear. And I'll give the floor to you then again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mauro. Thank you, Frederic. So we can start with the questions. Let's see if we can also put them on the screen.
Okay, very good.
So you can start with the first one, PowerPoint.
Yeah. If you want, I can start reading it.
Yes, that's from Mike Tatton.
Okay, 1 second. So the first question says, Mike Tatton. If one clause within an Annex Z set, so this means a clause or subclause that is referred to in the Annex Z set, contains a normative reference to a separate clause within the same standard, is this separate clause then part of the legal effect? And does it also need to be listed in the Annex Z set too? Well, the first question, is it part of the legal effect? Depends how you make the reference to the other paragraph or the other section or the subsection. If you say you make it normative, then to apply, let's say, the section that is referred to in the Annex Z set, you may have to apply the section that is not in that part. Does it also need to be listed in the Annex Z set too? No, it doesn't. Because it may happen that this other clause of the standard is applicable to both harmonized and non-harmonized part, for example. So the first question is this part of the legal effect? Well, it's part of the legal effect by indirect reference, let's say, because the Annex Z set is referring to a section that you need to comply with another section. Okay, but this other part of the section could serve not only that harmonized part, but also non-harmonized parts. Okay, it could be, for example, a test method. Imagine that is a test method. Okay, then of course to comply to assess in this case the part of the Annex Z set. The part that is mentioned in the Annex Z set, you test it with the other section, or it could be an additional element. But it's referred to and it's the same as if you refer in a normative way to other standards. Okay, but you refer to not in the annex, you refer to in the paragraph. Okay, so I hope, Mike, that this answer clarifies this. Germaes, the difference between general and professional use can have an impact on the applicable legislation. Yes. Why can this type of intended use not be mentioned in the scope? Because it doesn't have to be mentioned in the scope. It has to be mentioned somewhere else. If you want to mention it in the standard, you mention it in the standard, but not in the scope. Because the scope is the application of the standard, and it could be interpreted that the technical committee tries to break the let's say, not impartiality, but the, sorry, now I don't find the word. It's not impartiality. This means that the standard, you are trying to force that the standard is going to be used by a particular private economic operator. So, and again, remember those standards in a very famous series of harmonized standards that were saying these standards are intended for people without disabilities and people of normal age or something like that. Sorry, a particular product can be used by anybody, and the scope is not a place to limit. You may say inside the text of the standard, well, this kind of operations is for profession. Okay, you can include whatever, but putting that in the scope may be interpreted by a HAS consultant. And I know the question is from a HAS consultant, but it could be interpreted by a HAS consultant as an attempt to limit or responsibilities or limit the need to perform risk assessment or limit the capacity to reply to essential requirements. So I would strongly recommend not to use the scope for these kind of things. Yeah, also necessary for multi-directive standards. I imagine that you refer to sections or subsections. Frank Russell. Is technical compliance to a harmonized part of the standard permitted to require compliance to a non-harmonized part? My question is, why not? So this could mean that you are using a harmonized part for complying with other elements of I don't see the reason why not. So I don't think one of the colleagues, unless someone is reacting, I don't see any reason why this could not be the case. Example to the previous question, LBD guide and Annex 9 on criteria applied for the allocation of products covered by standards in the 60335 under the LVD or machinery directive. Okay, thank you, Gert. Helen, recommendation: avoid any reference in scope on whether a product can be used by professional or trained staff is surprising, because in electrical installations it is clear that there are places that are for skilled people and ones for unskilled people, and it makes it technical sense to have different requirements depending on the users. Fortunately, this is only a recommendation and not mandatory. Well, first, Helen, thank you for your comment. It's clear that this is a recommendation, but it's a recommendation if you don't want to let's say, to potentially find issues, because our recommendations are based on exercises, on previous assessments that led to problems. But first of all, let me tell you, we are not saying that the standard shall not comment that certain products or certain areas should not be accessed by professional or trained skill. So I don't understand your surprise, because in reality, I'm not saying that the standard cannot contain this. The only thing I'm saying is the scope is not the place to say it. Okay, so I hope my comment is clear enough. We are not saying that the technical committee has not the right to say, okay, certain operations are for skilled people or for trained people. Of course, this is the reality in engineering. We know that well, we have many examples. I could give you, for example, the telecommunications common infrastructure in buildings. It's only for qualified installators that have to enter there. Even a substation, a transformer substation, it's not for anybody in the building. Let's go to visit the substation. No, sorry. This is for. I mean, this could be even risky for the human lives. The only thing we are saying is, don't put it in the scope, because if you put it in the scope, it seems like you are limiting the things that then you have to put in the standard. Okay, I don't say this is the intentionality, but it may sound like it is the intentionality, and then it may create problems. Okay, so I hope both Gert and Helen understand what I mean. Don't put it in the scope. You can put it in the standard, in the other parts of the standard, but don't put it in the scope. If you put it in the harmonized part of the standard, again, I would not do it, but the technical committees are free to do, and you may justify why you think this is necessary. So it's your decision at the end. So you are right. Fortunately, these are recommendations, yes, because we are not going to force you to accept any of these recommendations. Thank you. Gert Gremmen. I think this is a reference to someone. IMHO. Harmonized standard excluding a category of persons in the scope will never create presumption of compliance, well, of conformity, and of presumption of compliance, well, presumption of conformity with a product, as most directive require essential requirements for all persons. Well, this is the main idea behind, of course, but it is clear that what we were saying is, please do not do it in the scope. In the other parts of the standard, at your own risk. But let's say clearly what we are saying. We are saying not in the scope. And then, of course, you see, if you put it in the other parts of the standard, you may find, well, that someone is challenging or asking why. But in any case, it's up to the technical committee to decide. Gert Maes. CENELEC Annex Z, well, does not contain subsections. This was a mistake, I told you. I mean, it's not a matter of the CENization of the, I can tell you, I was personally the secretary of the Spanish Electrotechnical Committee since the beginning of my career. So it's not a matter of being pro or anti-CEN or pro anti-CENELEC or more focused on CEN or on CENELEC. It was a mistake, sorry. It's maybe a Freudian mistake, but Annex Z also exists in CENELEC. It's only a different thing. It's the references of international standards with dated or undated, in this case, dating the references. Ivan, what is the risk to use a non-harmonized standard? No HAS assessment. Okay. No, there is no risk. I mean, I always, first of all, a harmonized standard, I was starting the presentation saying, if a standard is not cited, the industry can still use the standard. All the CENELEC standards are valuable standards. All the IC standards are valuable standards. But a standard that is not cited in the official journal under the LBD or under the MC or under the Radio Equipment Directive, it simply doesn't give the legal effect. So this means manufacturers cannot claim presumption of conformity for applying the requirements of the standard. It's as simple as that. There is no risk. It's simply that you use it for your own compliance. And remember, if you don't have presumption of conformity, then you have the burden of proof. You have to demonstrate that you comply with essential requirements. Okay, so the risk of non-harmonizing a standard, not offering for harmonization, is that you don't have legal effect, which is the presumption of conformity. What is the risk of that? Is that if you are not applying a harmonized standard, you may be confronted with a situation where a market surveillance authority of a particular country may say that you don't comply with the essential requirements. That's the risk. And you were asking which is the risk. This is the risk. You may be confronted to the burden of proof. You will have the cost of demonstrating that you comply with the essential requirements. So I think it worth the cost to try to get it harmonized. This is the, I don't know if the question was, if I have answered your question, Ivan, but this is my poor experience of 25 years working in this field. So I'm sorry. And here, yes, I think I sounded prepotent, so I ask you to forgive me. Sorry. Helen, to prohibit references to testing methods in Annex Z is also very surprising because from the legal point of view, it is important to clarify the way to check the product. Completely agree with you. But we are not saying, we are not prohibiting references to testing methods. We are prohibiting references to testing methods alone in the Annex Z. So this means you may refer to a subsection that contains both requirements and test methods. Okay? Or you may refer in the Annex Z to a section that contains requirements, and then there is a reference to the test methods, which could be in the standard or in another standard. The only thing we are telling you is that references in the Annex Z should give requirements on how to respond to the essential requirements. This is what we are saying. We are not prohibiting anything. We are just saying if you refer to a paragraph that only contains test methods, you may have a lack of compliance. But there are smart ways of doing it. And then Gergremen says normally clauses with test methods are referred in normative way. Exactly, Gert. So they are included in the text having legal effect because at the end they are referred to by the paragraphs that are referred to in the Annex Z. Tony Wilkes, that's a good question. Who decides whether an essential requirement is not applicable? The EC or the TC or the consultant? No. I mean, is the technical committee the one that makes the assessment of the product, makes the assessment of the risks, makes the assessment of the essential requirements, because there is also another question about this a little bit later. And then, of course, the technical committee says, well, this is applicable, this is not applicable. So in reality, it's not that the technical committee is excluding the technical committee is simply saying here that they consider that for the particular product or the particular scope of the product, a particular essential requirement may not be relevant, may not be applicable. Then, of course, if the technical committee is not right, it is possible that the HAS consultant will tell them, look, this essential requirement is applicable. Or if the HAS consultant doesn't spot it, and then the commission assesses the standard before citation, then it's too late, but then the commission may say, sorry, this essential requirement is applicable, even if the committee says it's not applicable. What may happen then? Or the commission decides not to cite the standard in the official journal, or the commission decides to cite it in the official journal with a restriction. The restriction is normally, because I don't work in the commission, so I'm not the one to say this, but the restriction could be, looking at the experience in the past years, that the standard provides presumption of conformity for all the essential requirements except this one, and then the manufacturers have to demonstrate that they comply with the essential requirement through other means. Again, referring to the risk that was referred by one of the questions before. So I hope this Tony, I don't know if you agree with me, but this is, again, this is not EY, this is not the commission, this is Paco Verdera just giving you my experience after looking at many assessments. So, of course, these are recommendations. The technical committee is the one responsible for drafting the standards. Gerhard, what is exactly meant by part one of a standard? In the internal regulation, it appears not to be mentioned, as not mentioned. Well, a part one of a standard is a part one of a series of a standard. So you know that sometimes you have EN 60240 part one, 60200 general requirements, 60240 part two, specific requirements for whatever, 60240 part 2, part 3, specific requirements for handheld, whatever. So this is what we mean. Part 1 is the part 1 normally could be generic requirements or general requirements. Sometimes part 1 is vocabulary. Sometimes, I mean, it depends on the architecture of the standard. This is what we mean by part 1. Roland, unlike CEN, in CENELEC standards, the requirements are often placed in the same clauses as the test instructions and the acceptance criteria. Very good. I can agree with you. I mean, not in all the cases, but yes, it happens often. Yes. Okay, agreed. Thank you. Great, Roland, for clearance. It is better to separate requirements from test methods. Yes, it is better. It is best. Again, we are giving recommendations, but the technical committee is the one that knows the product, is the one that knows why they want this. And if you prefer to have everything in the same section, the only thing that we are asking you is to separate inside the section one subsection with the requirement, one subsection with the assessment methods. That's it. And then you refer to in the Annex Z the subsection with the requirements. Unless the tests, remember, if the tests are part of the essential requirements, so if the tests are mentioned or the assessment are mentioned in the essential requirements, then you may directly refer to the test method part. Okay? Gert Gremen, Tony, the TC decides. Yes, I agree. But it may impact the ability to obtain presumption of conformity. I would say presumption of conformity here. And a second harmonized standard may be needed, addressing the missing essential requirements. Gert, I cannot say more. Thank you. Kai, what is the understanding of reproducible? Oh my God. There might be cases where the test will not produce always the same results. In the area of cybersecurity and RED, as well as the upcoming Cyber Resilience Act, I have to interpret, I guess this is the Cyber Resilience Act, there is an essential requirement that the product shall be free of known vulnerabilities. There is and will not be a single list database including all known vulnerabilities at a given time. No, in particular, because that's precisely the know-how of the hackers. No? But okay, so in this case, what is the understanding of reproducible? We are not saying that you will list all the vulnerabilities for this, okay? And it is clear that it is very likely, considering your comment, that the standard will not have a closed list of vulnerabilities, but the standard shall be in a position to anticipate the vulnerabilities and give the tools for the manufacturers to respond to the essential requirement, to the corresponding essential requirement. In this case, I have to check, because of course, in the case of RED, yes, because we have harmonized standards, or sorry, draft, they are still not cited in the official journal, but CENELEC, now, yes, I was going to say CENELEC has recently published a series of 4 standards which are fundamental for cybersecurity. Okay, of electrical equipment under the Radio Equipment Directive. It's still not cited, but it's a very important set of standards. No, okay, these standards they are responding to the essential requirements. In particular, not to the essential requirements themselves, they are, but in particular, they are replying to the standardization request. Okay, so Kai, frankly speaking, I don't know to repeat, because I have no better definition of what is reproducible, but I think that what you are saying is true. I mean, the problem is I don't think there is any problem with the 2 things. So a test shall be reproducible, give similar results, and I don't know how the test or the assessment method will be defined. But if you tell me that I'm telling you that there will be a free, a well-known list of vulnerabilities, then I say, no, this is not what I said, because I didn't mention that. Okay, so I think the 2 things may be right, but they are not related. Okay, so they are different aspects, in my opinion. I may be wrong, because I can tell you this is so maybe I'm wrong. Thank you. In any case, let me tell you, I'm giving you now my spontaneous opinion to your questions. We are going to put the answers in writing, and we are going to assess the answers with a group of people. Please, apologies if I'm not replying correctly some of your questions. It's not made on purpose. It's just that maybe my imagination at this moment of the day is not better. But just to tell you that the answers given in writing to the questions, they will be, let's say, assessed and checked by a group of people. And now I'm giving you my spontaneous reactions. Okay, so apologies if I'm not very successful today. How can I implement marking requirements in a product standard without the risk of an EU commissioner? I don't know how it sounds, this to be maybe a past experience, rejecting the harmonization of a product standard after a successful HAS assessment because there appears to be in conflict with the EU marking requirements. Okay, where can I find rules for this? Okay, well, first of all, the consultants, we can make mistakes. Okay, so we are human. Even if we have a team of people reviewing their, of course, not from the technical perspective, but from other perspectives, the assessments of my colleagues, the HAS consultants, we all have a bad day. So it could happen that a particular day we were not very fortunate, we didn't understand well the sentence, whatever, and then we say, okay, the standard is compliant. Okay, it may happen. Well, first of all, the Commission is not bound by our decisions. First thing, and of course, I'm not. I don't work in the Commission. I don't think I will work in the Commission, so I'm not in a position to say what the Commission has to say. But what I can tell you is that the Commission may see something that the HAS consultant doesn't see. Secondly, the Commission is not a desk officer. is the college, the full college, composed of the different DGs and the different members of the European Commission. They all have different aspects. When they take the decision on citing a standard in the official journal, it may happen that different sectors have some views that are also relevant at the time of taking the decision of citing or not citing. So where can I find rules for this? Well, unfortunately, rules for humans making mistakes, there are not. But rules for criteria that can be applied when citing a standard, unfortunately, the only rules I can find to you or I can recommend you is the Regulation 1025 and the applicable guidance documents that could be drafted by the European Commission in the context of the harmonized standards. Sorry, in the context of the new legislative framework directives. But yeah, well, I understand, Dieter, that maybe you are just expressing a frustration on something that happened. Well, it is very unlikely that the Commission will support always or will follow all the assessments from the consultants. But so this means that we also may make mistakes. Helen, I would like to emphasize that prohibited reference to testing methods is more than surprising because we had understood that the way of checking, sorry, because it has disappeared from my screen. Okay, I would emphasize that, yeah, surprising because we had understood that the way of checking requirements was the most important part of the legal. See, yes, I think I was not very fortunate, Helen, or Helen, with you, because frankly speaking, we are not saying that test methods are not important. We are only saying that they don't have to be directly cited in the Annex set unless there is an essential requirement that refers to assessment. This doesn't mean that they cannot be referred in the harmonized part of the standard. Yes, they can be referred. They can even contain in another subclause inside the clause that contains the harmonized part. So I'm not saying that maybe I was really unfortunate when I was explaining that. I hope, Helen, you understand me. I never said that they are not important. I never said, because on the contrary, they are the means to check if compliance has been met or is met with the essential requirements. So they are important. The only thing we are saying is don't list them in the Annex set. So maybe maybe today is not my best day. Apologies for that. Tony. Gert. So this is a dialogue amongst colleagues. I like this. So, okay. So Gert. So would the HAS consultant be expected to check whether claims of non-applicable are appropriate as part of the assessment? Of course, Tony. We are paid for that. So if a technical committee is saying that an essential requirement is not applicable and it is applicable according to your criteria, of course, you have to say it. Then the technical committee will follow your recommendation or not. But this is part of your work, yes. And then Gert says the contrary, as I said. No, but we will flag the fact that the candidate harmonized standard, well, in reality, you are saying the same as I'm saying, okay? So both. No, but we flag the fact that the candidate harmonized standard does not cover all essential requirements. Here, it should say all essential requirements. In itself, that is permitted, but it creates confusion to the manufacturer as they need another way to cover the... Yes, let me explain something. If an essential requirement is not applicable, this happens many times, for example, in the personal protective equipment regulation. Okay, so you have particular PPE that are addressing specific essential requirements. And then you need other harmonized standards to address the other relevant applicable essential requirements. Okay, but if a standard does not cover a particular essential requirement because it's not applicable to this product or to the scope of the standard, of course, the Annex A has to say not applicable. I hope you understand me. I think we are all thinking the same, but I think we are all trying to say different things. I don't know why, but we have, I'm sure we have a common understanding for this. Gert Maes. LVD standards contain marking requirements. That's an answer to Ellen, I think. Marking requirements that are clearly safety elements, safety objective, but can overlap with clause 6.5 or 6.6 of the LVD. How do you finally deal with that? Okay, Gert, we will answer in writing this. Well, now, frankly speaking, I have read several times the LVD, as you can imagine, but in this moment, I prefer to read it carefully and then we will give you the answer in writing. Gert Gremen, Ellen, testing is not an essential requirement. Equipment shall comply to the requirements only, meaning verifying a measurand to a limit under well-defined conditions. Yes, but we are not saying, the only thing we are saying is please do not put it in the Annex Z set. That's it. So put it somewhere else. Put a reference even in the harmonized part, but do not put it in the Annex Z set. I don't think it's so complex. It is. Okay, Tony Wilkes. Gert, just to check, if an essential requirement is not applicable, then I assume this is different to the case where essential requirement is applicable but not covered by the clauses, subclauses of the standard. I'm not clear what missing essential requirements mean. Yes, so it means that an essential requirement may be, of course you are answering to Gert, not to me, but I will explain. An essential requirement is applicable or not applicable. Okay, so if it's not applicable, because the scope of the standard, the title of the standard makes you think that it's not applicable, then it's not applicable. This means the standard doesn't have to cover it. But if it's applicable and it's not covered, okay, that's another story. But the Annex Z set shall indicate that the standard is applicable, but it's not covered. Okay, and then maybe it will be covered by another standard. Frank, okay, I think Frank, must Annex Z set declare coverage of risks or essential health and safety requirements? Have essential health and safety requirement that does not necessarily relate to risks. Yes, so the answer to your question is, must Annex Z set declare coverage of risks? No, this is not what I said. What I said is that before drafting the Annex Z set, you have to consider the essential requirements and you have to consider the risks. If you tell me that some essential requirements do not necessarily relate to risks, then risks here have nothing to do, but you have to consider the essential requirements in the context of the product. And then you have to draft the Annex Z set. I think we agree. I think we are saying just the same things with different words. Gert Gremen. That's very good. This is an inclusive dialogue amongst HAS consultants. Gert Gremen, Tony, you are right, but I have yet to find a non-applicable essential requirement. Okay, noted. Gert Gremen, Tony, for the article 3.3 in the red. Okay, we will check this because again, 3.3 it's the spectrum, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure, so I prefer to read the red again and then be careful to say something. Mike, the rail sector has a directive containing essential requirements. So the rail sector, yes, you mean the interoperability of railway equipment, I guess. Okay, so it has a directive containing essential requirements. Below this, there are Commission's regulations. You may maybe refer to the TSIs, maybe, which include a technical specification. Yes, sounds like TSIs, technical specifications of interoperability, TSIs, which respond to these essential requirements. And then there are harmonized standards which can respond to the interoperability requirements. Well, I need to interpret. In the directive and or interoperability requirements in the regulation. Question 1. Is this structure present in other sectors? Fortunately not, because frankly speaking, in my opinion, it's very complex, but okay, that's my personal opinion. It's not the opinion of someone else. No. This structure is normally not present in other sectors. I would not say it's not present in other sectors, but it's normally not present in other sectors. And in fact, if you tell me this is a interoperability of railway standards, the Annex Z has particularities. Okay, so I would say this is one of the exceptions, maybe to the and possibly for this sector we need particular guidance. And this is a very good idea, Mike, that you have made this question, because maybe we could explore the relation between the Interoperability Railway Directive and the TSIs, the Technical Specifications for Interoperability, because you know the TSIs refer to standards in a mandatory way and in a direct way in the text of the standard, which deviates slightly from the new legislative framework model. Okay, so I don't want to give here a speech that may bore the rest of the people, but Mike, thank you for this question. I think we will give you in writing an answer. And this could be a good idea possibly for a dedicated session on the railway sector. Thank you so much. Question 2, doesn't this make the Annex Z more complex? No doubt, Mike, no doubt. But okay, this is my opinion again. What I'm giving you is my reactions, just to keep you entertained in this siesta time. But yeah, definitely this makes it more complex. I agree with you. Thank you, Mike, for your question. I don't know if we have more questions or more reactions, maybe, to what I said.
Has his hand raised.
Who?
Gonzalo has his.
Gonzalo, you want to say
on the railway? I would just want to point out that indeed there are different type of standards. You know, harmonized under the system, harmonized directly cited in the TSIs, and I think there is still another category, and there are specific guidance on this area for the railway. So I think what is important is to make clear that we should not mix systems and types of legislation, because we all know that the different sectors have different approaches.
I cannot agree more with Gonzalo. I always agree, but in this case I cannot agree more. More questions?
One more from Tony Lucas.
Tony, sorry, but again, just to check, non-applicable in this case mean non-applicable as far as the scope of the standard is concerned, and not necessarily non-applicable as far as the device is concerned, which is covered by the scope of the standard. So I think what you mean, Tony, is that, of course, you will have to assess if it's really applicable or not. And if you consider that for the device, the technical committee is saying it's not applicable, and you consider it's applicable, then you justify it, and then the technical committee will consider it, if it's applicable or not. And then the commission, when the standard is offered in the official journal, will consider it or not. I think we are all saying the same, but maybe we are using different words. Thank you, Tony, for this.
So we went to
Gonzalo.
Two more questions. I think, Paco, you can answer the two new questions that appeared.
Yeah.
Paco, you're muted. I don't know if you're...
It's not that I muted, it's that I didn't know how to unmute me. Sorry for this. Okay, now I go back to the question. Sorry. Okay. But I had two, and now it only appears one.
Yeah.
Okay. Ahead. No, it doesn't matter. So let's see. Maybe I will check. In any case, we are going to reply to all of them in the chat, but in the written. So ahead of the introduction of the new machinery regulation, will all Annex Z set for existing harmonized standards will be updated, or there will be a reassessment of conformity assessment against the new regulations, since the new essential health and safety requirements, even if even if the same may have different references. Well, first of all, the essential requirements are not the same from the regulation and the directive as far as I understand, because, for example, I gave you today an example of assessment of tests for machine. No, I didn't give it today. It was in the morning. For example, there is an essential requirement on assessment that the standard shall give the means for assessment on the capacity to spill, to pollute the environment with fertilizers, for example, or pesticides. The machines for spreading pesticides, they have to assess the machine according to the non-spilling of the pesticide itself. No? And this means that there is an essential requirement that was not before, because if you see the machinery directive, they were not essential requirements dealing with assessments. And now in the machinery directive, sorry, in the machinery regulation, you have different or slightly different essential requirements. But your question is, what do we do with these standards? Well, in principle, if I'm not mistaken, again, because I'm not an expert in machines, there is a new standardization request, or there shall be a new standardization request for machines, according to the new regulation. The previous standards were drafted according to the standardization request and the essential requirements of the machinery directive. Okay, so what to do? The ISOs may see if the standardization request allows them or not to revise the standards, or they may propose the Commission to revise the standard and adapt them to the new regulation, of course. This is what I think, but this is my opinion. Again, Paco, VERDERA is not the ISOs and is not the Commission. But yeah, this is what I think. Thank you, Joe, for the question.
If I may, Paco, I will jump in for this question. So related to the Annex Z template, we have actually a draft Annex Z for the new machinery regulation that is ready.
Very good.
And it will be finalized and updated as soon as the standardization request is approved.
So it was not approved.
Not yet. It's still under drafting, but we already have an Annex Z draft that is ready for the new machinery regulation.
Very good, Fred. This is very good news. Thank you so much. Joe. Sorry. But why disappear?
He was thanking us for the answer.
Okay. Thank you. No, it's because my eye must be very slow at this time of the day. Okay, thank you.
So there are no more open questions. Is there anyone else that would like to still pose a question? Then please do so now. Otherwise, we will wrap up the meeting. It seems not. All questions have been answered, which is great. So as already explained by Frédéric, we will create a document with all of the questions, which will also be reviewed by the Commission and by CCMC. So this will take a bit of time, but you will receive it later on. You should already, in the days to come, receive this presentation that we can already share, so that will be shared with CCMC on one of your platforms, I understand. So apart from that, I can only thank you for your participation. First of all, to the TCs, of course, who turned up here, TC members who turned up in great numbers. So that's great. I really hope it was useful to you, this session. And also, of course, thank you to CCMC for hosting the session, and Paco, of course, for the extensive feedback you provided. So thanks again for all your efforts. And that's it on our side. I don't know, Frédéric or Paco, if you would want to make any final words.
Yes, thank you, Dan. So myself as well, I wanted to thank you, EY and the team. So Dan, Anna, team, Paco, thanks a lot for your presentations. Thank you to my team as well for the support and the presentation. Thank you to the audience. Thanks for your time and your presence with us today. As Dan said, the training material will be made available probably later this evening, so you will have it very soon. And the Q&A, as Dan said, will come to you in the coming weeks. The time it takes for us to go through the questions, to answer them in a written manner, and then we will share the Q&A with you. So thanks again for your time. And Paco, you want to say something still? Yeah.
Just before we send, please do a search of Annex Z, please. And there should not be any single P reference to Annex Z in the presentation.
We will check, but I will wait for Hannah's updated documents before I share them on the platform.
Very good.
So thanks again a lot, everyone. I wish you a very nice evening and see you soon in a coming webinar. Thanks a lot and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Bye.
evening.